Hi, fellow classmates. I'm happy to share with you a brief introduction into parenting traumatized children and youth. My goal is to give you a clear overview and quickly introduce a few of the people who have contributed greatly into this field. Also, share a few of the tools and skills that have helped these traumatized children and youth and their families, and also the adult professionals who have worked with them. And I would like to then end with a few helpful resources. To start, I would like to share why I chose this topic. I have, for the majority of my adult life, worked as either a counselor or an educator with children who have been traumatized, either within juvenile hall, homeless shelters, public school system, working with refugee students, and children and families who are survivors of domestic violence. So I have come to see patterns and recognize when children are behaving in ways that are really clear that they have been traumatized and exposed to really either non-parenting or really destructive and harmful parenting. So also, I have, along with my partner, adopted a child. Well, I'm the stepmom of a child that he adopted. And also, I have become the guardian of my niece, who I have helped parent since she was little, and again, now as a teenager. So just through all of those experiences and our own curiosity, we've come into a lot of really good resources, but number one, key one that I highly recommend everyone who has a youth or child in their life who struggles with really big behaviors is to, if you have access to family therapy, definitely take full advantage of that and ask your family therapist for resources as well. That's how we're helped to come into contact with several of the podcasts and audiobooks and resources that we now have and take full advantage of in our lives in terms of helping parent our youngsters. So one in particular who I highly recommend for her accessibility is Robin Gobel. She has a podcast called Parenting After Trauma. I'll share this towards the end and a few more of her resources. She has helped combine the work of several doctors who have focused into the relational neuroscience and the development into that the brains of children and youth who have been traumatized. This work has come about by doctors Bruce Perry, Daniel Siegel, and Stephen Porges. And my understanding is from their work is that at root, children biologically need to have healthy attachments to their parents and caregivers from a very young age, including from the womb. And this attachment needs to be one that is healthy, where there is co-regulation, right? Otherwise, if there is neglect, abuse, frequent dysregulation, what tends to happen is a child has an increased fragile nervous system, which leads to more of functioning from the brainstem part of the brain, the limbic system, where the behavior tends to be more along the lines of flight, fright, fight, or freeze. Let me see, flight, kid runs, fight, obvious, or freeze, and freeze can often look like silence, can look like hiding, it could look like no longer being present in one's senses. So a lot of like dysregulated type of behaviors tend to show up when children have been traumatized or neglected. So I want to share with you a little bit about attachment. It's something that is really key and something that I think we have a bit of an understanding of when we see mothers and fathers who are able to respond well to a child when a baby, especially when they're crying. you will notice that when a parent is able to respond in a way that's very empathetic, full of compassion, a desire of wanting to understand what that baby needs, that baby is starting to develop a sense of felt safety, that this adult is there to care for them, not to neglect them, not to abuse them, not to show them who's boss, but more so there's this dance between the child and their parent in becoming regulated. The idea of regulation can also be understood through this metaphor that Robin Goebel is really good at giving. It helps to think of a thermostat regulating, like feeling the temperature of the room and then regulating itself to know what is the perfect temperature that is desired. It's very difficult to do, especially if a child is exhibiting a lot of really harmful, mean, destructive, violent behavior, to be able to maintain not only one's cool and calm, but also the ability to be in balance with one's emotions, to maybe feel initially a bit thrown off by the child's behaviors, which is perfectly normal and makes sense, but to then be able to regulate oneself, to be able to offer regulation to that child. So there's a lot of really interesting, important ways to be able to teach a child what to look out for when they are starting to become dysregulated, with really good symbolic imagery, utilizing images such as the owl, the watchdog, and the possum to describe different brain functions and tools that the children themselves are then able to utilize, right? But really, first, it starts with the parent and the parent's ability to learn how to regulate themselves, have emotional boundaries from their child to not get emotionally hijacked, and to help create that felt safety for themselves and for their children. So with that, I think it's a pretty good overview of like the very at-root basic parts of parenting traumatized children. I also want to share with you a book that was very key for me and my partner, Parenting Children of Trauma, by Marcy Pousset. And this is clearly going into attachment disorder. It's one of the type of behaviors that are just really big and difficult to understand, that comes about after trauma. But also the podcast that I'm really interested in sharing with you is called Parenting After Trauma. So you can just look that up and you will find a clear link into Robin Goebel's website, where she has free webinars, ebooks, a parenting support group. And she is also has a connection with another podcast, which is Empowered to Connect podcast, that's presented by a male. So you have a bit of different sides and different perspectives, but all in focus around how to help provide support and really good parenting. And again, the style of parenting that's being promoted is positive parenting. So if you haven't seen my other video, I recommend that you do. A couple other books that I highly recommend, maybe you've heard of them before, are The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel A. van der Kolk, and What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry. Bruce Perry has a number of really important, powerful books that have to do with understanding the neuroscience of children who have experienced trauma and neglect. Healing the Broken Brain by Dr. Mike Dow and David Dow is another excellent book I highly recommend. So you're lucky to live in a time where there is a lot of research and really good support. So if you're working with children, if you have a child who's exhibiting a lot of behavior, definitely recommend to hold a lot of compassion for yourself and for that child and dig into the research that's available to you. Okay, thank you for your time.